you got to charge. You got to charge through everything, and you can't let little things bother you.
Hello. I wanted to challenge myself to come up with the weirdest voice to start off this episode as possible. I don't know why. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Brandstetter, founder and podcast producer at Max Podcasting. And you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 250. It's tricky to... No, I'm just kidding. And today's guest is Dr. Rob Yonover. Rob is a geochemist and volcanologist who is also a serial inventor, and he is one of the most fascinating people you'll ever hear from. And he has created a series of incredible life-saving inventions, including, most notably, the SeeRescue streamer. In this episode, we dive into what that is, how it works, and how Rob's life and career have had several different fascinating touch points, including the ocean, surfing, volcanoes, the military, SpaceX, Hawaii, and flying fish. Just a heads up, the first part of the podcast involves a story with a submersible. And just as a disclaimer, this recording happened well before the terrible submersible tragedy that happened earlier this year at the time of this recording. So if it sounds weird that we're laughing and joking and lighthearted about submersibles, that is why. That being said, it is truly just an awesome interview. Let's get to it. Dr. Rob Y. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Dr. Rob Yonover, the man behind SeeRescue streamer. Really just fascinating and life-saving business, and one of the most interesting backgrounds that super excited to dive into, pun intended, today. Rob, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Max. Great to meet you. Great to be here. Thank you.
Of course. Back at you, and super excited to, as I just alluded to, talk SeeRescue streamer. But before that, you are the only person I've ever spoken to who has been 2 miles under the sea. What got you there?
I got to Hawaii to get my PhD working on volcanoes, and the guy that my professor offered me a research assistantship to work on a project where we examine an ocean floor spreading center off Galapagos. And he goes, do I want to work on that versus, subaerial regular volcanoes? And he said, by the way, we're going down there in a submarine, in a submersible. I go, yeah, I want to go. And as soon as I got the offer, I was all in. And then when I got to the ship, they tested you to make sure you're not claustrophobic, because the submersible, it's the same one that they found the Titanic one with, the red and white one. It's in the beginning of the Titanic movie. Anyway, you go in while it's still on the ship, and they're blowing hot air in there to test to see if you don't freak out from claustrophobia. And I just muscled all my will together to not freak out. I wouldn't freak out, but it was just tiny in there. 3 people fit, but I could only bend over like halfway. And there's a tiny little window the pilot looks out, maybe 5 or 8 inches across. And each scientist on each side has like a 3-inch window. So my strategy was just to put my eye on that window, keep my notepad and then my camera, and just take pictures. And we had the robotic and hydraulic arms on the outside of the sub. So we took lava samples, and I ended up studying the lavas that came out of this spreading center, and worked at MIT and NASA Johnson Space Center using laser systems to analyze the lavas. Well, that became my PhD work, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, it sounds pretty boring. No, that's incredible. I mean, you talk about parts of the world that so few people have ever ventured to, and you've got to experience it. I know you've done multiple runs like that. How would you characterize kind of what's going through your head when you're like, holy shit, we're We're very deep down here.
Exactly. And I was a young grad student, so I didn't get to dive till like the 13th dive out of 28. I got the 13th and 28th, I think, or 27th. And I was on a night shift, so they're feeding me. I would wake up in the morning for breakfast. For dinner, work, and then go to sleep after breakfast. And they weighed you before you go on the sub, because the sub is all weight. There's no tether. It's not tethered to anything. They just have free fall, and it takes 2 hours down to get to the bottom with all these weights. And then they leave the weights on the bottom, and they have little thrusters that drive around. And on the way down, it looks like it's snowing, because all these, in Galapagos, the bioturbidity is so high. There's so many like dying little microorganisms. It looks like it's snowing. And it goes from blue and green on the surface to gray and then black. And my pilots were jokers. The first pilot played Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd, when we got to the bottom, which was pretty incredible because that's what it looked like. And I'm not a biologist, but I saw some really weird stuff down there. And I know someone's pointed out that knows the name of this creature, but it looks like an eel with a monkey's skull, and you can look through the tail is all clear and iridescent. It was crazy, just like it was lighting up in fluorescent colors. Just crazy stuff down there, and just an incredible. And there were big faults and fissures. The spreading center's splitting apart. So I wanted to drive in there, but there's it's like a big valley, and you could drive in, and the pilot's like, "There's no way we're going in there, because if you get stuck, they have a release where they can pull a release and let the metal part, the titanium sphere you're in, from the submarine superstructure. But if they pull that, they've never pulled that in the 30 or 50 years they've been doing it. And if they pull it, it's like bobbing up from a tennis ball from the bottom of a pool. I don't think we would have lived. But anyway, it was an incredible experience. And I, of course, after working at NASA, I wanted to be the first man or human or woman, whatever. I'm not a woman, but a man, to be in inner space, 2 miles down, and outer space, because the Challenger they were starting to take astronaut scientists up in space. And right when I was trying to get involved in that, the Challenger blew up. So that dream was shelved. I'm waiting for Elon Musk or someone to invite me to go up in space. Maybe they'll hear this podcast.
Yeah, I think so. tuning in weekly, but yeah, well, you definitely deserve to explore and explore. And
oh, thanks.
You're clearly fit for the job, whether that's down low or up high. But you mentioned that it seems like a very, very claustrophobic space. How do you get over the claustrophobia when it's not only a small space, but you're so far underwater?
Yeah, especially like the second dive. There's CO2 scrubbers in there, so they, if they don't work, you die. And when they close the hatch, my second submersible pilot was a young guy, and he smoked this last cigarette puff, blew it out the top, closed the hatch. And I go, God, that's encouraging. Then on the way down, he's going, oh, the CO2 scrubber isn't working, and he hits it. He goes, okay, there it goes. I'm like, oh my God. It's so rinky-dink. But it wasn't rinky-dink. It was just, nerve-wracking. And the technique I used was to just put my eyeball on that 3-inch window the whole time. So even though if I look back into the sub, if it's me, a pilot, and another scientist in this tiny space as big as it was a little ball, basically. But if my eyeball, I could see out for, quarter mile. I could see out and see creatures and see lava. That's how I did it. And between the camera, focusing on looking out, taking photos, taking notes, and instructing the pilot where to take samples, that got me through the 8-hour day without freaking out. But it was a test. No doubt about it. I'm not highly claustrophobic, but it wasn't really cool putting me in a metal ball for 8 hours.
I'm freaking out right now. I think I'm just going to go outside and find an open field and just walk around and breathe.
Exactly. It was a trip. But a situation like that, you're so amazed by what you're doing, that within minutes or an hour, you forget where you are in terms of the claustrophobia. And you just go for it. It's just like a lot of this great stuff I've done in my life. There's measured risk, right? These guys have taken the risk. We've measured it, and it's worth it because the payoff was huge. So it's like, okay, if I die doing this, great. In fact, the week before we went, we were on an active volcano in Costa Rica, And luckily we got there late and it erupted while we were on it. And I'm taking photos. And this is the old days when you actually wound your film each shot. So I click, wind. And I had like a 10-shot sequence of this eruption getting bigger and bigger and this cloud forming above us and these huge rocks as big as cars hitting right near us. And we would have died if we got there earlier because we were macho enough. We would have gone to the top. But same thing. As I'm flicking the pictures, I'm like, I may die right here, right now, but at least I'll get my camera and I'll have contributed to the volcanology world somehow.
So I don't know if you are James Bond or Aquaman or something in between, but you're
well,
living
thanks.
like
I got
a
a
superhero wild animal life. But let's get to something that actually ties to that you started a business around. Let's get to SeeRescue Streamer. I know that's a hard segue.
Yeah, sure. While I'm getting my PhD in Hawaii, my friend's a pilot. One of the grad students was a pilot. We rented a little Cessna, and we're flying to Kauai. And I look down, and I see all this water, and the plane sounds like a VW that needs a tune-up. It sounded horrible. I'm like, we're going to go down. And I look down at that water. I'm like, if we go down, I'm a good swimmer. I'll live. And my late wife was with me. Maybe she would live too, possibly. I'll have to swim with her for a mile or two back to shore. But the plane's going to sink. And it really bothered me. And I'm like, what do they have for that? They have smoke signals. They have sea dye marker. They have flares that you shoot up in the air. And even if they have EPIRBs or locating devices or cell phones, which they didn't have, this was the 80s. But even then, even with cell phones that don't get wet, that are waterproof, you still need to get a visual when you see someone. And then a week later, I flew to Miami where I grew up, and Christo, the artist, had wrapped the Biscayne Bay Islands in pink plastic. And I flew over that in an airplane. I'm like, oh my God, that's it. If I could just get a piece of pink plastic, people could see us. You could get a visual. So it took me years to figure out how to make it not curl up and twist up. And I patented struts in it, air-filled struts like spreader bars every 3 feet. So as it pays out, it doesn't twist up. It's like a centipede. It's segmented, so it won't twist up and curl up. And that became the SeeRescue Streamer. And one of the Navy guys I showed it to goes, hey, man, great idea, but lose the pink. International orange is the color I stuck on, and smartly, because I fit it to the existing technology. And I got it military approved, got national stock numbers. It's used all over the world. It's saved lives. I got it on Shark Tank. Now they're flying with it on SpaceX. So Elon Musk, he's a customer of mine. I never bought a Tesla, but he bought a streamer. So I like that. So every astronaut has a streamer under their ass, which I like.
That's a good. That should just be your tagline.
Yeah, I know.
It's you, toilets, and toilet paper about products under people's asses, especially astronauts. So that's an incredible aha moment of like you had that moment of tension and fear about what if something happened, and then you see this installation and it's like, oh my God, that's it. So I love that. You mentioned that there was multiple years of testing just to get this to unfurl.
We're all of us humans are into survival just by nature. So that's the most likely time you can innovate is when you're under pressure. And if you take any survival classes, the first thing they teach you is the greatest survival tool of all is your brain. So you got to take a step back, take a second, and think about the situation, and then analyze it and go and make your solution. It took me years. And that's the other thing about inventing and innovating. It takes 10 times as much time and money as you think it is. So I always tell people, don't quit your day job so you can quit your day job. If you quit your day job and put it all into your invention or innovation or new business, it's too risky because it takes so long. So that story I described of flying in the Cessna was in 1985. You weren't even alive, I bet.
Yeah, this is true.
Okay, well,
you caught me.
the story, the idea. I have a million ideas, and I like to crowdsource them. I ask friends, family. I go to Taco Bell when I'm eating a bean burrito. I ask them what they think of this. I'll ask anyone. I want a whole sampling of what people think of an idea, and then I keep a lot of my ideas come and go, but that one never went. It never went away. I knew it was a great idea, and I knew it would save lives and be a good thing one day. So I finished my PhD, worked on that, and I even took a job with a guy that invented the smoke in the cockpit system. I helped him develop that, which is really cool. So when you're flying in a plane and smoke fills the cockpit, it's an inflatable clear bag that pushes up to the windshield so you can see through the smoke to land the plane. It was brilliant. It's on a bunch of corporate jets now, and I think UPS and FedEx have it. The regular airlines don't, but should. Anyway, he had some money issues at one point, and I said, hey, let's pull the streamer in. And he goes, I don't like that idea. I'm like, okay. Anyway, he couldn't pay me after a while, and I just kept going on that one and did some side things, but just kept plugging away. It's like, you're familiar with the tortoise and the hare, right?
Yeah, of course.
I'm the ultimate tortoise. I'm just plugging away. I'm not giving up. And here we are, like almost 40 years later. The streamer, I licensed it for 15 years and got royalties and helped my licensee build the company worldwide. We have customers all over. And then that ended, and it's like, this isn't over yet. And I put a clause with my attorneys into the license that says, when it ends, no matter how it ends, I want all my stuff back, because I'm not letting this thing die. And here we are, 7 years past the end of the license, and now I'm running the whole thing myself. And I got it on Shark Tank. I got SpaceX. I got another, I can't say the words, but it's on a major military aircraft, and it's standard equipment, fighter jet, all over the world.
Awesome. I mean, I'm excited. Not even knowing the words, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's actually on a couple of them, but I don't want to get in any trouble talking about military capabilities. And again, I'm on the safety end. I'm not making weaponry. I'm saving people.
My wife, Dana, calls me the tortoise as well, but that's just because I move so slow in everyday life. So two peas in a pod.
Okay. You live longer, but life is a long game. It's not a sprint.
Totally. That's what I'm saying. So you alluded to some of your customers, and you were just in awesome spaces. I think it like pumps you up just hearing about like military, SpaceX, anything in like the aerospace or defense space.
Right.
To overuse the word space.
Absolutely.
Is a cool and obviously meaningful place to be in. How did you start to pitch and get in front of these quote unquote customers, which sounds funny, in the first place?
It's a good question. I knew that it had a military, government, Coast Guard angle to it. I mean, I invented it to be a mandated product. It should be on every life jacket and every life raft and every flight jacket. That was really the idea. It was never like consumers. There was this WAD, they used to call it WAD, World Aviation Directory. And this is, again, before internet. We had these big books that they were directories of information. It was like Google. So I went into this big book and I said, I'm going to just cold call. I was famous for cold calling people or cold faxing people or cold letter writing. And I just went right to the top. I went to the head of the Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and I wrote letters. And then in parallel, I faxed every magazine outlet there was in the world almost. And this is totally foreign to you, but in the old days, the phone rates changed at 11 o'clock. It was cheaper, which is funny. So, and I had a fax machine. I wrote a cover letter. Yeah, whether it was to military guys or to media editors. My brother, who was in marketing and advertising, told me, he goes, look, editors are sitting on their ass all day wondering what to write about. You need to tell them. It's like, okay. So I wrote a press release, and I made it one page, so it was a cheap fax, one-page fax. And at 11:01 every night, I would send like 50 faxes, 100 faxes. It was like a fishing expedition. I put out 50 or 100 lines. I get a bite. Then I'd get an article. The Miami Herald was the first article that wrote about the streamer. I photocopied that, made that a release, and I sent that out 100 times. And I kept doing that. And the other thing is I'm a polite pain in the ass. If I want something and I think you should do this, like if you're an editor or writer and I believe there's a good story for you, I will call you endlessly. And it took me 3 years to get Outside Magazine to write a story about it. And they would say, oh, we can't do it now. Maybe. I goes, well, should I call you back in a couple of months? I said, yeah, that sounds good. So I make a note of it. And I call them back in a couple of months. After 3 years, they finally wrote something. And I also am really good about letting people run with it and customize their take on it. So, for instance, I think Men's Journal, when they wrote about it, they said Gilligan's Island would have been one episode if they had the SeeRescue streamer. And that was great. I didn't think of that, but because I gave them leeway, and of course, you really don't have any choice. They're going to write what they want. So I kept writing, and one of the big breakthroughs was a guy called me, and he goes, look, you live in the state of Hawaii. You have a powerful senator, Senator Inouye. He was a very powerful senator. He was like the number 2 in the country. And you have a piece of survival gear for the military. He said, I could get you millions of dollars every year. You just need a lobbyist to talk to the senators and the congressional people and the military. And I had to take a royalty pay cut from my licensee because he made me contribute to the price of the lobbyist. And again, lobbyists get a bad name, and most of them should. But in this case, they're doing a good thing. We're saving lives. And they basically made the military aware. That's all they really did. And then they put customer and money together. The customer and the military wants something to improve their safety and survivability. And congressional can. So we got a couple of those that really helped launch it into the military in a larger scale. And just like the first couple successes, once you get in with an Air Force or a Navy approval, the Navy approved it and called the only passive and continuous signaling device. And they like it because it was discretionary too. So you could put it out on your raft and go to sleep, and it's still working for you 24/7. On the flip side, if the enemy comes around, you could pull it back in and then redeploy it. None of the other signaling devices were passive, discretionary, and redeployable like that. So there were great advantages to it, and there still are. And I'm not giving up. I'm going all the way, and I always used to say that. I'm going all the way. Who's coming with me? And something, one thing you learn is you're probably going to go alone. In the long haul,
I'm coming with you.
All about
you got me at least.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I could convince people, but talk is cheap. Everyone talks smack till it's time to write a check. Just like the sharks on Shark Tank. They all loved it, but hey, I couldn't believe it. They didn't want to invest in it. I'm like, okay, you don't want to save lives? You want to invest in cupcakes or whatever you're going to invest in? That's fine. Guys all care about money only. I care about bigger things. I thought I made a real low offer because I thought I was trying to get a bidding war, but it worked out for me because the airing went off and they rerun it every month or so on CNBC. It's been on 50 times in addition to the ABC airings.
That doesn't hurt from a marketing or PR standpoint. So you've had you've had all the deep sea diving experiences. You got volcano experiences. You got military as a customer. You got Shark Tank.
Right.
And then why not get the attention of SpaceX as well? How did that come about?
Like 30 years ago, I started going to trade shows with the military. SAFE Association is the big one I'm involved in. It's an international association for safety and survivability. There are ejection seat people and life raft people there, and all the different militaries there from all over the world. And I've been a big part of that group for 25, 30 years now. Random people come through there to go to that meeting. It's open. If you prove you're not a spy from a bad country, you can get in. And it's funny because over the years, even when I did a presentation for Boeing with the smoke in the cockpit guy, and then the NASA guys, and even SpaceX, it's funny because I'm older now, and you see these, I call them punk kids, come by the booth, and they're going, oh, yeah, we're from SpaceX. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, have fun with your rockets. But you never know if anyone's serious or not. And sure enough, like the first manned flight was about to happen a couple of years ago, and I got an email, and they said, hey, by the way, you have a safety material data sheet on your stuff to make sure it's not explosive? I go, yeah. I go, why? They go, well, it's going to go up. We're going to fly with it. I'm like, what? That's huge news. And they were so casual to them because they're populating a rocket. So that was it. I basically, they came to my booth, and as much as I hate trade shows, I love trade shows because that's how things happen. I don't really like to shave, but when I go to those meetings, I shave, I put a suit and tie on, and, I'm all buttoned up in my booth. I have all this good credibility, so people come by, and I do my pitch, my little elevator pitch. I try to get them interested, and it's easy. It's a visual product. It saves lives, and I'm passionate about it because I totally believe in it. That's people. You got to believe in your stuff. And that I have no problem with. But that's how it happened, and I didn't even know it. I don't even know how they got it at first because I have so many reps, military reps, and consumer reps all over the world. And reps don't want to tell you their end customer because they're always worried that I'll go around them or they'll go around me. So I sell it to reps and they sell it to someone. But it was from that meeting that they bought it from one of my reps. So I don't even know which of our product goes up into space. And I called them after. And I said, "Hey, can I get it back?" And they laughed. Everyone asks us that. And they said, "No, you can't."
I'm going to call you Mr. Trade Show.
Oh, totally. I mean, I hate them and I love them. I wrote a book on trade show that includes trade show tips called Hardcore Inventing. And one of the lines I have is, and it sounds a little creepy now, but you can follow. Sometimes it's like I used to go to shows where I didn't have a booth, and you're walking around, you're poaching guys from other booths that you can read. You gotta learn how to read name tags upside down. You gotta prioritize who to talk to, who not to, and if a big guy or woman is there, and woman obviously you can't do what I'm about to tell you, but I follow them into the urinal and get if that's your pitch option. If it's an elevator pitch, it could be a urinal pitch. You got 20 seconds to get 20 more seconds from them, to get 20 more seconds from them, to get a card from them or give them a card. That's the beauty of trade shows, is you get to mix with the really successful movers and shakers in whatever field you're in, right? And if you polish yourself up and are respectable and you have something interesting and valuable to say to them, they'll listen.
You've got it down to a P and not down to a T.
That's very good. Yes, down to a P.
How else besides, these huge, well-known, you call them famous customers, and, the awesome, publicity and appearance on Shark Tank, what else would you say has been the biggest driver to the growth of your company?
Well, necessity. I needed to make money. I live in the most expensive place in the country. And my wife, unfortunately, got MS like when she was 37, like 30 years ago. She's passed away since, but she became paralyzed and was in a wheelchair for 19 years while we had little kids I had to raise. So it was like, it was almost an impossible situation, monetarily, time-wise. And I actually wrote a book about that experience, because Caregiver Survival Guide, because first of all, men are rarely caregivers. And when the New York publisher went for a picture for the cover, they couldn't find a suitable picture of a man pushing a woman in a wheelchair. It was always the other way around. So, and to have a male and an inventor. So I invented all these ways to cope and deal with. I'm a problem solver. I take problems. And the overriding thing in all this, to answer your question really, is I'm a hardcore surfer. I surf big waves on the North Shore. I dreamed about waves when I was growing up in Miami. When I first surfed little 1-inch waves, I'm like, I was hooked for life. And getting to Hawaii 38 years ago, I had to do my hardest work to keep in the game, to stay fit enough to stay up there and not get killed on the North Shore, and not have to move away from Hawaii because I couldn't afford it. So that was the driving force behind all of it. And it's a passion. I have passion about science, innovation, even outreach, teaching. I love that. But surfing, I like fishing, boating, snorkeling. I like anything ocean related. And for me, being near and in the ocean is a driving force. And it's a lot of where my good ideas come from anyway. I used to fish. I fished 25 miles out in rough water, tied to my boat, so if I fall out, I don't die. And out there, you got a lot of time to think. There's no interruption. It's me and the birds and the fish and the whales. And I start thinking about contingencies. Okay, if both motors break, what do I do? If I get cut really bad, what do I do? If I get tangled really bad, what do I do? If this fish spears me in the chest, what do I do? If this breaks, or just start thinking about my life on land. I think about problems there. Just kind of work it out in your mind and just go through all the iterations to see if you can come up with a solution, and then test it. Science, I'm barely human at this point. I'm pretty much part fish. That's by design.
If you yourself are finding yourself part podcasting and part entrepreneurship, then you will love the Podcasting to the Max newsletter. It's where podcasting meets entrepreneurship, and it is a short and sweet email from me every Thursday. It goes straight to your inbox and also has some terrible jokes that really I should hire Rob to write the jokes because he's got a better sense of humor. But anyway, Podcasting to the Max newsletter. You can sign up at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter, and it'll change your life. No, it won't directly change your life, but I think there's some pretty good insights there that I put together for you. Now, let's get to the most impressive, speediest, quickest, promptest rapid-fire Q&A you have ever heard in your life. You segued this perfectly because would love to wrap up with some rapid-fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Okay, sure.
All right. First one. I've been planning this for a week. No, I'm just kidding. I just thought of this question thanks to you. If you were a fish, what type of fish would you be?
I would be a marlin or ahi because those are the apex predators. Ahi's a big yellowfin tuna or marlin. Although I do like what we call malolo, which is a flying fish, because they've mastered the water and the air. I don't know if you know about flying fish.
Unfortunately, I know more about Flying Fish Brewery in New Jersey than I do about actual flying fish. But I've seen clips of them, and
yeah, they don't really they glide really. They don't fly, but they jump out of the water at fast speed. They have these big old fins. They're small. They're like as big as your hands, and then they fly with their fins. They glide. I've seen them go hundreds of yards. Pretty cool. But I'll still take a marlin or a tuna because it's nice to know that no one's really hunting you, except maybe if you asked me water creatures, I would have gone with orca because they're the king of the beast. Killer whales. Those are the apex. Because the water, the ocean's a scary place. So I don't want to be looking over my shoulder all the time. And if I'm one of those fish, not a flying fish, mahi, the dolphin love, when you guys call them dolphin, they love eating mahi, flying fish. So I don't want to be one of them really, because you'll end up getting eaten on your third month of life or whatever.
All right. So, Aquaman, you're Aquaman and trade show man. How about on the surfing front? You mentioned how much you love surfing. What's your tip for somebody who has either never surfed or has very minimal experience surfing? What's the most important thing to remember if you want to get into it?
I'll give you the same tip I give all my buddies who are long-standing surfers. Surfing is 99% paddling. So before the paddleboards and the inflatable paddleboard, which I actually have a patent for from the rescue board perspective, one of my other inventions, and you stand up with a paddle. Before that, there was a thing called it was just called a paddleboard, but now it's called a prone paddleboard, which means you lay down prone on it and you paddle. It's the same exact motion for paddling a surfboard. And like Mr. Yamagi, what was his name on, that wax on, wax off?
Mr. Miyagi.
Mr. Miyagi. Wax on, wax off. My advice, if you want to be a good surfer, you give me 6 months of prone paddling, 20 minutes, half hour, hour a day. When you can paddle really, really well, then you're ready to learn how to surf, not the opposite. If you really want to be a real good surfer, because paddling is everything. That's your motion, that's your motor. And, most guys, and the thing I do, and I add a dimension to it that I really like, which is a couple of years ago, I got caught inside by 20-foot waves in a row. I had my 12-foot long gun, a big pointy board, and a 20-foot long leash on my leg. And it just kept me in the same spot. A 20-foot wall of water kept breaking on my head. And I only had 10 seconds to go underwater, 6 or 8 feet down. The big wall of water passes. You come up for a breath, and then there's another one. I did that 20 times in a row. I was so tired. I got to the beach. I kissed the sand, and I was tired for a week, literally. That's how close I was to dying. But again, I analyzed that situation retroactively, and I said, I'm not doing that again. I'm training for that. So now on my paddleboard, I paddle for lunch, my lunch break every day. If I don't surf, I got a 20-foot leash. A leash. It's a piece of string in my pocket. I tie it to my paddleboard and flip it over. And I started with 21 breath free dives, 10 feet down, come up. I replicated that situation. And now I'm up to 50 times in a row. I could do it 100 times in a row. I could swim like by going 10 feet underwater, take a breath, 10 feet underwater, take a breath, 10 feet underwater, keep doing that. And now when I get caught inside, I just got caught inside this week. And I look at it, I go, I know what to do. They're not going to be 50 waves. I can handle 10 or 20, but they're not going to be 50. And underwater, it's mellow with all the violence of the crazy waves blowing up on top of you, go over you. So that's my advice for more advanced surfers. But it's the same thing. Too many surfers and people in general take up a water sport and don't get good at swimming and diving. In addition to the 51 breath free dives, I do a whole medley of swims. And again, no mask. I didn't say it yet, but no mask, no snorkel, no fins. Just straight away. Get used to being underwater with your eyes open and swimming, because that's how you are surfing. You don't have a mask, you don't have fins, you don't have snorkel. So don't wear all the crutches. So that's my advice for beginning and advanced surfers. and it works. I mean, I'm 60. I'll be 64 in a couple of months. And I'm still in the game, you know. I'm an old man, but I'm still surfing big waves. So
you take it back. I'll call you young man, but all your hobbies are inspiring. Like you truly know how to live life to the fullest. I know that's cliche, but it's awesome. You do so many things like that.
Thanks.
You mentioned earlier you get a lot of your ideas when you're outside or in the water. What is it like? Is there something in common with ideas, potential businesses that you think of that are like common themes that makes you have that aha moment of like, oh, this is something that's worth pursuing? Like, what is it that stands out?
Absolutely. Well, for me, it's always around survival, because I put myself into positions, and even working on volcanoes. I mean, if you're always close to dying, and again, I'm not doing it on purpose, but I'm doing shit that's dangerous. So and in the water, you can die quickly. So a lot of my inventions are in that same theme. I invented a portable pocket desalinator, a portable flotation device, an inflatable paddleboard, a video search and rescue device. I mean, those are my real ones that I have patents on. But then I have a whole range of stupid inventions. I'm not stupid, simple, that solve everyday problems that are not necessarily marketable, but I get great gratification from solving a problem. For instance, my back was getting pretty bad from paddling, and I can't really reach the middle of my back to put sunscreen on. Now I use a little paint roller. People laugh at me.
Yeah.
But the early story was when I did surf with other people, when I would go with them. Now I just meet people in the water because it's too much of a hassle to push people where you want to surf and vice versa. But I said to my friend, hey, can you first of all, I don't have a beautiful woman in a bikini that wants to put lotion on me all the time. That's a fantasy. That's not happening. So my friend, my surf buddy, I go, hey man, put some sunscreen on me. He puts it on. He goes, hey, do my back. And he had this gnarly, hairy back. I'm like, okay, I got to invent something. I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's out of necessity.
That's survival in terms of just living with yourself after you're going through that experience.
Exactly. Anyway, so to me, it's just, we're a bunch of apes running around on Earth with all these accoutrements of life and technology. But when you dig down enough, we're just animals trying to survive and thrive. So if you're challenging yourself for survival, whether it's survival financially or socially or environmentally or in terms of your dangerous activities, whatever it is, it's easy to think about it. It's the same reason why, if you go to Africa and you do the statistics on percentage of kills, a lion only gets its kill like 10% of the time, some low number. All the animals, only the hunting dogs, I think they're only like 30 or 40%. You know why their kill rate is so low? Because they're chasing a gazelle. The gazelle's running for his life. The lion's running for a meal. That's the difference. And the same thing in inventing for survival gear. If you have to invent something that's going to save your life right in that moment, you're gonna work hard, you're gonna think hard, you're gonna try hard, you know, versus casually thinking about something in the comfort of your home and it's air conditioned or whatever, wherever you live, and and cushy scrolling around on your phones, in this world that we live in now.
So as we sit here in a comfortable home with AC/heat on, what final question? Something else that you spend a lot of time with: volcanoes. I don't think I knew volcanology was a word, let alone field of study, before today. I can guess what it means just knowing the root word and suffixology. Like, was there anything in your childhood, growing up, like anything that foreshadowed that you would want to work with volcanoes one day or study volcanoes?
I think it was twofold. One is I grew up in Miami, which is flat, so I never saw a mountain. So, every summer we'd go on trips in the car, road trips. But I started to see mountains and then volcanoes in little, storybooks. As a kid, you start to see volcanoes, yet I've never seen one. I'm like, I would like to see one. That's the first thing. And then when I was about 13 and started surfing in Miami, I had like a triple curse, which is the waves were horrible, the women were mean, and there were no volcanoes or anything exciting in the science and earth world. And the other thing is at 13 or 15, they used to have surf movies that would come to your town, and every great surf spot is next to a volcano. Fiji, Hawaii, Costa Rica, every good surf place, it's near a deep water in a trench or open ocean, like a hot spot like Hawaii. And then in college, I had this wacky professor in Geology 101, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And he was like, I knew I was good at science and math, and he just blew my mind. He's a great close friend now. We're really tight, and we always have been. Since that day I took his class, he thought I was an idiot. And then 2 years later, there's an optical mineralogy weed out class, and I aced it. He ended up hiring me to be his teaching assistant. I got a master's working with him, and he worked at NASA. We worked with lasers. Anyway, he was a wild man, but his lecture was incredible. And the whole Geology 101, and I was sick of people asking me, what are you going to do? What are you going to be? Because where I grew up, it was like, you got to be a doctor, a lawyer, or, those were the two options, right? There wasn't anything else, or business. And I didn't want to do any of those. So in geology, there was volcanoes, diamonds, gold, oil. So any of those, I could shut people up. This is what I'm doing. I'm interested in this. And then the volcanoes, I actually worked on a gold deposit with him and for my master's in Nova Scotia, Canada. We dreamed about volcanoes. I went to Florida State. He was a professor there. And again, no volcanoes in Florida. And he took a trip. And the other rule I have in life is if you talk to someone after they take a trip, and when they tell you about it, their eyes light up and they drool a little out of the corner of their mouth, that makes me want to go there. And he told me about a volcano in the Caribbean. I'm like, oh, he just was all lit up talking about it. I'm like, I'm going there. And then he told me about Africa and seeing animals. I'm like, I'm going there. He was real influential, and he really was the first. And of course, as you start learning about them, it's just, they're incredible. I always tell people, I'm more impressed by natural wonders than human wonders. I'm not looking to see the pyramids or the Great Wall of China or Machu Picchu or churches built in Italy that are built by thousands of years of slavery. I mean, it's all that stuff is done by keeping humans down. And, it's great achievement. And I've been to a lot of these places, but I'd much rather see a volcano or a waterfall or anything incredible in the nature, wild animals. So I don't know. And I think as a kid, I was always kind of a loner. I couldn't sleep that late, so I'd get up at 6 in the morning and just start raging. So my parents threw me at the other end of the house in this carport converted room, and I got to just get out of that. They wanted me out of there because I'd wake everyone up. So we lived on this little lake in Miami, and I would just go fishing and exploring, and I just always felt at peace and calm in nature. And that's when my mind could fire, like even talking to you, it's hard to think when you're talking a lot. You know what I mean? And I talk a lot, so I have to shut up. And the only time I could shut up is when I'm alone,
No, well, I love it. And we're here to hear you talking and share your insights and stories. So, I really appreciate it. And
No problem. My pleasure.
Rob, you have officially got my juices flowing. I'm pumped to visit Hawaii.
Well, come on out. Everyone should come out. I mean,
yeah,
it's an incredible place. I mean, it's if you haven't been here, and the thing that people don't talk about is the most basic thing about this place, which is the air and the water. There's cool trade winds. So it's not like Miami where you have to run for air conditioning all the time. It's cool. It's cold. My house doesn't even have windows. It has just a ceiling fan, no AC, no heat. Yet all year I sleep with 2 blankets year round. Number one, and then the water is just like silky wine. It's just incredible, and it's cool. It's not hot and it's not cold. So it's really the best part about Hawaii is the air and the water and the people. The people are great, but you got to show respect. You can't come here like you're owning it. You got to respect the local people, and they'll respect you.
Definitely. Words to Hawaii by. Well, Rob, thank you so much. This has been an absolute blast, and just absolutely love your story. And yeah, of course. My pleasure. And I know that you can, if you're interested in SeeRescue Streamer, that I can't pronounce right now, you could go to SeeRescueStreamer.com. Rob, is there any other place that you want people to connect with you online, or anything else you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, you could just go to Amazon. The streamer's there, SeeRescue Streamer, and a bunch of my books are there too. If you want a hardcore inventing, caregiver survival guide. I even wrote a kid's book, Brainstorm Island. So remember Curious George?
Yeah.
I wrote a little book for kids. I do a lot of outreach education. I'm really into inspiring kids to be innovative and shut off those phones. I'm really anti-cell phone, smartphone. And I wrote Hardcore Health, another book. I'm really into fitness and taking care of yourself. We're all gifted with these beautiful bodies, and 80% of us abuse the hell out of them.
Well, I just threw my smartphone out the window. No, I'm just kidding. But no,
well,
definitely with you. It feels great to unplug, more
absolutely.
often than not these days.
Yeah, but anyway, on the internet and just, I've done some crazy stuff, and it's fun to share, and it's fun to I try to inspire people to do. To dig deep and see what's in them. Everyone has an invention in them. We're all inventors. So, and the saying, or teach what you know, or what is it? Invent what you know. I had a kid once, so I said, solve a problem. If your brother's bothering you in the car ride to school, build a barrier. So there's just everyone has problems every day. So attack those problems and try to find a solution. And one of my themes is function over form. Don't worry about how pretty it is. Worry about how it works first, right? And of course, for commercializing, make sure there's a market. I mean, a lot of my inventions I never even try to market because they'll get laughed out of existence. But it's just good to solve the problem anyway, even if it's personal.
You read my mind yet again. Any of those were good candidates for this, but we always wrap up with final thoughts. Is there just one quote or one line of parting advice that you want to leave us here with today? It could be about anything, but really excited to hear what you have to say here.
I'll just go with my mantra, which is when we were 13, 14-year-olds and it was a cold winter night in Miami, which did used to get down in the 50s. We want to go surfing in the morning, but we were afraid because it was so cold. It might be big. And this guy, Joe Vegazzo, a little older surfer, he had this little drawl, and he looked at us, and he's going, you got to be hardcore. And that was the mantra, and it still is. You got to be hardcore, meaning you got to charge. You got to charge through everything, and you can't let little things bother you, and you have to take the fear and hesitance you have and just go for it. Go charge ahead, and even if you fail, even my kids, I used to root for them to have little tiny failures so they learn how to deal with it. But if you never try anything, you'll never know. And that's it. You got to charge and be hardcore. And that's my mantra, and I'm not changing. And I think if people thought more that way, they would be less hesitant. And it's in all of us. I know it's easier to be a cog on the wheel and work for someone and do that, but always charge something you have a passion for in your spare time. You got 40-hour work week, you got 40 hours of sleep, you still have 40 or more hours to invent something on nights and weekends. So get off your smartphone, dumb phone, and do something. Whether it's write a song, write poetry, invent something, do anything. Sew a sweater, make beadwork, whatever. Do something. Make something.
I think do something, make something is my new mantra. Thank you so much, Rob, Dr. Rob, for coming on the podcast, sharing your incredible life and career story and all you do to inspire and educate. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. And go do something, make something with them. You can also find us at Good Pods, where there are really, really good podcasts and podcast recommendations and podcast people and setting alliteration records with all the P's. And for any help with podcast production, see, did it again, you can learn more at maxpodcasting.com and sign up for the Podcasting to the Max newsletter. That's at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. Until next time, let your business run wild. Bring on the bongos!